All right. Well, thank you for joining me. We have two big stories that I was hoping to talk to you about, so I'm glad you're able to join. The first is the arrest of these county officials, a judge, for vote harvesting. I'm wondering if you can give us a little
Oh my,
a little bit of information on that and what happened or what you know.
yeah. You're talking about in Uvalde, I believe. I got the news about the same time you did. My good friend and fellow freshman Don McLaughlin actually won as a Republican in that district, but it wasn't for a lack of trying of cheating by the Democrats. My understanding is there were a number of county officials who were involved in it too. This just highlights the need for the Attorney General's office in the state of Texas to be re-empowered or reauthorized to prosecute election fraud in the state. It's more pervasive than anyone would have you believe. The Democrats spent a lot of time a few nights ago at around 11:30 at night trying to argue that this is not a thing. It doesn't happen. It very much does.
Do you, I mean, do you have any specific details on what they're accused of doing or what happened? And if
Yeah,
not,
they were going to an old folks home with ballots, handing them out, picking them up, taking them, and there was, as I understand it, it was a pay by ballot scheme. Like they were
wow.
giving them however many dollars a name to go over to the old folks home with ballots and pick them up.
Wow. Yeah, I think we've seen a lot of investigative work on things like this. I believe James O'Keefe had uncovered something like this years ago out of I think it was Minnesota, a video of a man with stacks of ballots, and he was bragging about how much money he gets paid from collecting these things. Do you think that's more widespread in Texas than just this one case?
Well, what are the chances that we caught the one person who's doing it, or that we caught the one ring that's doing it? Of course, yeah. I think, of course, it's going on more than anyone cares to admit. On the Democrat side of the spectrum, they say this isn't a thing; it doesn't happen. On the Republican side, a lot of people will say it. Yeah, maybe it happens, but it's not material. It doesn't affect the outcome of an election. Let me tell you, you're talking about South Texas, and we're talking about literally hundreds, if not thousands, of votes. This is definitely material. It's something we have to keep an eye on constantly. It requires constant vigilance to fight this.
Do you think that they're tricking these elderly people or offering them something to get these votes from them?
I don't know. It's hard to say, but you think of people being in a nursing home or assisted living as being a vulnerable population. I think it goes without saying that there are people there who are going to be compromised, more susceptible to persuasion. This is not how our electoral process is designed to work.
Yeah, wow. There's also concern, when I talk to people about this, the concern is not necessarily so much that illegal immigrants are voting, but that with states like California largely operating as a sanctuary, they have large illegal immigrant populations, which boosts their congressional seats in the census. When they do the census, the population is increased, and for this, they're refusing to deport. Are there other concerns like anything you know of in Texas related to issues like that, based on what's going on with illegal
Absolutely.
immigration?
Absolutely. One of the big things we're working on right now in the state of Texas is bail reform. One of those is around our illegal alien population. It's going to come to the House floor eventually as SJR, Senate Joint Resolution 1, and it's designed to make sure that illegal aliens who commit a certain class of offense are not released on bail in the state of Texas. So we're talking about, Tim, the most violent offenses plus any offenses involving election fraud. And if you're talking about illegal aliens' participation in the criminal process in Texas, a lot of times we're talking about the worst, most violent offenses, or like in South Texas, they may be asked to participate in some kind of ballot harvesting operation. We're also trying to make sure that any illegal alien that's caught in the manufacture or delivery of drugs in the state of Texas is held without bail.
I mean, that sounds good. We've been seeing a lot, especially with Trump. The big story, of course, he's going after Tren de Aragua, MS-13. Do you guys have? I imagine being Texas, and especially with how the illegal immigration was handled under the Biden administration, you've got a lot of problems with that. Have you guys in the past few months been able to clean this up and change how things have been operating?
Well, everything that happens in the legislature is initiated by some major public event. In Dallas, where I'm from, the Dallas area, I represent an area in Denton County. In Dallas, we had a lady who was actually held up by some illegal gang members in her own home, held hostage. You may have heard that Tren de Aragua took over an apartment complex in the Dallas area. This is an ongoing problem. One of the issues that we're trying to address through House Bill 17, which was by Cole Hefner, we're trying to fight both state and non-state actors of international criminal influence. So organizations like Tren de Aragua, the cartels, are not able to acquire or hold real estate in the state of Texas.
You guys, you can't deport, right? Is that my understanding? It's a federal action for deportation?
Yeah, it's a federal action for deportation, but also one of the things we're trying to do is kind of force our sheriffs into the 287G regime. I'm sure you're familiar with that, where our sheriffs basically become deputized or empowered to work as part of the federal immigration system to make sure that people that they apprehend are then deported out of the country as part of cooperation with the Trump administration. It's a very important thing. Sheriff A.J. Lauerbach, who's now a state representative, is carrying a piece of that legislation.
I definitely want to talk to you about this foreign land thing, but real quick, what's it like since the Trump administration's come in? I mean, during the Biden administration, these videos were insane of the illegal immigration, and now we're hearing that border crossings have dropped by some 95%. It seems like the Trump admin is giving you guys the assistance you need, whereas Biden was fighting with your own state law enforcement. I imagine it's been good.
It's a precipitous decline in illegal immigration, which is exactly what we needed. The state of Texas was having to deploy way too many tax dollars and way too much manpower to the border, and still not even making a dent. I mean, we're now this is a much better time safety-wise for the state of Texas. We're seeing way fewer illegal crossings. But the Democrats haven't helped us with that at all either. They are trying to fight us on bail reform. They're trying to fight us on immigration-related measures. And obviously, you probably know we're trying to get our money back from the federal government as well for the $11 billion we expended trying to do the work of the Biden administration they refused to do.
Immigration was one of the top issues in the 2024 election and just in general leading up to it. What was the Democrats' argument to you guys, like in Texas, but also federally, to allow the degree of illegal immigration that we saw? How could they justify that?
Well, I'm sure you see it where you are. I see it where I am. Everything is empathy driven. It's emotion driven. It's these people are fleeing. They're looking for a better life. You know, they're coming somewhere to start over. We're such a land of economic opportunity. Of course, the nice thing to do is to allow people to come over whenever they feel like it. The problem is that they never get to the natural consequence of the argument, which is Jocelyn Nungaray. So we have Jocelyn Nungaray in Houston, who was raped and murdered by two illegals over the course of 2 hours in Houston under a bridge. Illegals. And her mother, Alexis Nungaray, actually came to my committee in the Criminal Jurisprudence Committee in the Texas House and testified in favor of bail reform, trying to make sure that this can never happen to anyone else again. You cannot separate the empathetic or emotional aspects of illegal immigration from the hardcore reality of the criminal element that comes over here in the United States and the economic impact on services of the people of Texas as well.
It's a crazy argument. I mean, even, we've had a lot of these stories. You had Laken Riley, obviously, as another story. And what we end up hearing from many of these liberal and Democrat activists or politicians is they're all just seeking a better life. It's almost like they're applying some utilitarian view. It's almost like an inverted Blackstone's formulation where they say it is better that several innocent people are raped and murdered than one poor asylum seeker be turned away. And instead of just saying we should not tolerate any degree of murder of our own citizens and exploitation of our economy, they just allow this stuff to happen. But moving on.
It's truly toxic empathy is what it is.
Yeah.
It's, we might do some good for these people over here. If there's one or two people who are raped, robbed, murdered, then maybe we can balance the harm against the greater societal good of making sure that these people can get jobs and have a bank account and buy a house in America. I'm sorry, that's not the bargain the American people voted for.
And I think maybe they'd have a semblance of an argument if they said, we're going to change the law to allow it, instead of just, we're going to let a bunch of people in illegally to do whatever they want.
The law was an obstacle to the reformatting of the United States.
Yeah.
And you see that with the Biden administration's lax enforcement of the law. It's because the law is an obstacle to the reimagining of America. And by the time we got to November, thank God, enough people had decided the madness has to end. And we're not interested in the reformatting of America. Thank you very much. We like it the way that it is.
I think now one of a major move we're seeing is from you guys banning Chinese nationals, Russians, North Koreans, adversaries from owning land in Texas. Can you explain to us what the plan there is and what's going on?
Yeah, so I think we have just passed out of the House the strongest version of the hostile foreign land ownership bill that is going to exist in the United States. I myself wrote a bill that was modeled on Arkansas's act that that Governor Huckabee Sanders signed into law last legislative session in Arkansas. I think we have an even stronger version of it now. There was a little bit of pushback on, well, what about people who are lawfully here in the United States from China? They're tech workers, they're doctors. Should we allow them to own a house? I think you've got kind of the middle 100 people in our body out of 150 going, yeah, we probably do need to allow people who are rightfully here in the country and are productive to buy a house, buy a condo. The problem is that for every possible loophole that we leave the Chinese government or the Russian or North Korean or Iranian government, whoever the enemies of the United States are, they will exploit it. They will have lawyers reading, working, coming up with a plan to circumvent it as fast as they possibly can. You may be aware that the main thing that initiated this problem was somebody came in and bought 30,000 acres in South Texas up against one of our Air Force bases. Obvious security risk. And so we're not talking about some doctor's condo in downtown Austin here. We're talking about major threats to strategic infrastructure. I think we got a good enough bill off the House floor that is going to prevent some of that garbage from happening again. I think we're going to look back 20 or 30 years from now and go, how could we be so stupid to ever allow Chinese nationals, companies, affiliates, entities to come into Texas and buy our land?
Yeah, I mean, hopefully the federal government or other states start to fall in line as well, because there's only so much you can do. You can protect Texas, but if the rest of this country doesn't figure this problem out, then we're going to have a national, which we do. We have a national problem on this. One of the issues is, I was having a debate with this liberal economist. He was talking about how great it was that we have this trade with China that is completely lopsided. He didn't call it lopsided, but he said, Trump's wrong. And I asked him, if we don't manufacture and their labor is cheaper than ours, what will they use our US dollars for after we pay them? And there's two answers. Obviously, they're going to buy oil with the petrodollar, but they're buying U.S. land. They're buying our hard assets from us. Every day we buy cheap goods from them, we are just extracting more of our houses. So one of the concerns I see with this is for the next generation, I'm imagining Gen Z trying to rent an apartment and they're all owned by Chinese nationals, or that could be Russians or Iranians.
It's shocking. It's shocking to think that we could get there one day. It's already happening in many respects. We have foreign investors who are acquiring a lot of residential real estate in the state of Texas and elsewhere. I think we need to give, as a party and as a nation, we need to give President Trump latitude to reorder the international trade dilemma that we have with China. It seems like he's already making headway, that we're making advances toward equalizing our economic relationship with China. But you're absolutely right. I think the problem is we know what the right thing to do is, Tim. The right thing is to put China on equal footing with the United States from a trade standpoint, but there's pain to getting there.
Yeah.
And so all the businesses that depend on cheap labor, cheap goods, they're more likely to engage in rent-seeking behavior, say, hey, well, we need to use the power of government to make sure everything stays cheap for me. Well, that may be the best for you now, but it's not the best thing for the United States long term.
It is one of our challenges. I've seen so many stories from people saying that the tariffs on China was really bad for their small business, and now they may go under, and it's bad for the economy. The scary thing is, like you said, the pain that gets you to the right place. If we keep taking this cheap labor deal from China, our own laborers can't compete with that cost. The end result that I fear is a simple, tangible one is 22-year-old goes to rent an apartment, and it's a building owned by China. Literally, the Chinese Communist Party through a subsidiary.
We can never allow that to happen. We can never allow that to happen. I mean, you think about what the bedrock, the cornerstone of wealth creation, the engine of wealth creation in the United States is home ownership. We need to make sure that our young people have a future opportunity that we and our parents had to be able to carve a life out for themselves. We cannot be as dependent on China today as we are.
But it's so insanely hard right now. And, so you're mentioning these loopholes. For every loophole you leave, they're going to exploit. The challenge I see with this bill is what's to stop so the Chinese Communist Party says we want to own land near a military base, or we want to own large swaths of farmland, control the food production in the U.S. So they hire some, they dish it out to some run-of-the-mill Chinese citizen. He forms an LLC or a C Corp or something. The corporation buys it, and it's an American corporation. And so it is only one layer. But how do you stop these shell companies? The interest is still there, but they're going to find ways to hide it.
That's a great question. So I think we've got a good enough statute where we're going to be able to capture those entities where there is maybe limited partnership participation that's significant to a level of control. So we drafted that bill with that issue specifically in mind. But Tim, that whatever we do, there's always going to be a counter move. You may or may not be aware that with regard to Chinese entities or Chinese ownership, the government owns what are called golden shares. They don't even appear on the capitalization table of the company, the ownership table.
Wow.
They might have what's called one golden share. It means the country, China, owns it. They can take it whenever they want. So one of my big concerns, actually, Tim, was that eventually the Chinese are going to start using American citizens as a cutout. That the American citizens will essentially do business with China as their proxy or their affiliate and hold it on their behalf. And that is a huge concern. You'll never believe the loophole that was in the Senate bill that came over to us. They had an exception for leases shorter than 100 years. And so can you imagine?
It might as well be no bill.
You might as well own it in fee simple, because now if you got a 99-year ground lease, you own the improvements, and you say, oh, well, I don't own the land. You functionally own the real estate. So we were able to amend that thing out of there. This is going to require constant diligence on behalf of state governments, the state of Texas, other states, to prevent China from expanding its influence here.
This golden share thing you're describing. So I've never heard this. This is crazy. So basically, and it makes sense. So how does this work? Is it like?
So you've heard of Jack Ma, for example, right?
Yeah.
But he's a Chinese billionaire. Well, and you may remember a couple of years ago, Jack Ma just disappeared for about 6 months.
Yep.
Well, every Chinese business. So whether it's a publicly traded entity or a private entity, most of them are controlled by, or probably all of them to some degree, are controlled by the CCP. So you have no real transparency into the financial inner workings of those businesses. So you think about an American investor investing in China, you have no transparency from an audit standpoint of what's going on financially in that entity. And at the end of the day, because of this golden share concept, the CCP owns the company. They can take it whenever they feel like it. They can nationalize it, shift the ownership, shift the purpose of the business. There's no certainty at all.
So it's also kind of crazy to think this also lends to when these Chinese interests are buying American land, which has been a huge concern all over the country. We look at it on paper, and we're going to see either an American corporation that owns it, and that corporation is wholly owned by a Chinese national. But then China's going to have their own version of the books outside of U.S. law, where they say, sure, this guy owns that company, but we, the CCP, own him and his company. So we are actually secretly in control of all this farmland and land near military bases.
Absolutely. It's the same thing that's going on in offshore entities in the Caribbean, same thing that's going on in Panamanian entities that are used for money laundering. There's going to be just a base level of opacity where you cannot see who owns the entity or who controls it. It's one of the reasons that we put in the bill the ability for the Attorney General's office in the state of Texas to investigate that person or entity to determine whether they actually are an agent of the CCP. So, in other words, they don't have a safe home base to touch if they satisfy some piece of the statute. We're always going to have the ability to investigate it and then divest them of the real estate if they are truly an agent.
You know, when we, especially for like a show like mine and for a lot of people who follow it, we follow national news largely. And so I think a lot of people overlook the importance of state level politics, which can shape the congressional district, which literally does shape the congressional districts. But in that regard, Paxton's been doing one of the best jobs in the country in going after a lot of the fraud, corruption, abuse that we've been seeing.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I mean, I'm curious, considering what we saw against Donald Trump from the Democratic Party in various states, going after his lawyers and everything like that, I have to imagine that Democrats in Texas don't take too kindly to your AG over there.
Well, I don't know if you're aware of this, Tim, but I was Ken Paxton's lawyer in his impeachment trial.
That's why I ask.
And yeah. So you obviously are aware. It's not the thing that I'm realizing. So I'm a freshman in the state legislature here. The thing that I'm realizing, Tim, is the problem is not the extreme wing of the Democrat Party. The problem is we've got 150 members in the legislature. The problem is the 100 members in the center of the ideological spectrum here in Texas who are ideologically indistinguishable from one another. And you have the same thing that's going on in Congress. And, we kind of colloquially refer to it as the uniparty.
Yeah.
But when you have someone like Ken Paxton, who's doing the right thing, doing it aggressively, the party of the status quo, the people in the center are the ones that recoil in horror about that. And that's why he ended up getting impeached. I firmly believe that.
Do you think that was it was bogus, it was BS, just political?
Nothing to it. Absolute garbage. Should have never gotten off first base. Should have never come out of the house in the first place.
How does I suppose you've broken it down for? I'm flabbergasted that we're experiencing this at the state level, the federal level. You mentioned like this uniparty element. How do we get past this? I mean, nationally, state level.
Yeah, we have to be. Voters have to be more demanding on a local level of their representation and their representation in Congress. Voters have to be more informed. They've got to be more attuned to what the people they are electing are doing, because I think what I'm learning, Tim, is that if people stay in elected office for too long, eventually they become kind of merged into whatever this machine is. People come in with the right principles, the right beliefs, really fidelity to the people who got them there. And there's so much pressure in state government and federal government for you to conform, to get along so that you can, quote unquote, get things done, that eventually people cave. They transform into something they never intended to be when they ran for office in the first place. Many such cases, Tim.
Yeah. It's like they get in and they become jaded, they become nihilistic, and then they just the office becomes them instead of them taking on the office. They just go with the flow. So
absolutely, you look what's going on with Senator John Cornyn, who's going to be in a primary with Ken Paxton. John Cornyn's been working in government as long as I've been alive, just about. And,
wow.
Yeah, I mean, you look at his professional background. He's been working in government as long as anyone can remember.
So last question, I suppose. Is there anything that we can look forward to, actions you guys in Texas are planning on taking moving forward?
Guy, absolutely, Tim. Bail reform.
Yeah.
We need to make sure so that the cities in any state, but particularly in Texas, are eating us from the inside out. And it's because of their incredibly lax approach to the criminal justice process. We have violent offenders who are committing violent offenses while they are out on bail for horrific things. And we have got to get a hold of that. I think we're going to have something voted out of the House this week, out of committee, into the floor soon for consideration that everybody's going to like. We need to make sure that people who are violent offenders, repeat offenders, people who are a legitimate flight risk are not let out of jail, that they have to await their pending trial.
That sounds great. Well,
it could be great.
I do appreciate the time, Rep. Little. Where can people find you?
Yeah, I'm at Real Mitch Little on X. That's probably the best place to find me. Thank you so much for having me on. It's a real pleasure.
Yeah, is there anything else you want to mention before we wrap up? I give you the floor.
No, sir. You're doing a great job. I look forward to hearing.
I appreciate it. Thanks for joining us and giving some insights, and we'll see you next time.
Yes, sir. Take care.
Take care.